Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. This time we're tackling a pretty hefty topic, love.
Well, a specific look at love, I guess you could say.
Right, we'll be exploring C.S. Lewis's The Four Loves.
Yeah, it's a fascinating book. A bit unsettling at times, too, I have to say.
Oh, absolutely. But I think that's part of what makes it so valuable. He doesn't shy away from the complexities of love.
Yeah,
He really digs deep into both, the incredible good,
right.
but then also the potential for real harm.
Absolutely. The ways love can go wrong.
So to start, Lewis lays out this foundation with the most basic type of love.
Yes.
He calls it affection,
Okay.
or love as need. And it's that kind of instinctive love, like between a parent and a child, or even a pet and its owner.
Oh, okay.
It's about seeking that comfort and closeness, a need to be loved and to love in return.
And he uses this really striking analogy of animals to illustrate this point.
Oh, yeah.
It really gets at the heart of it. It's primal, it's instinctual, it's about fulfilling this basic need for security and warmth, like a mother bear protecting her cubs.
Exactly. And it's something most of us can relate to on some level.
Of course.
But here's where Lewis takes this idea and turns it on its head a bit.
How so?
He shows us how this need for affection, well, totally natural, can become kind of, warped. Is maybe the best way to put it.
Warped.
Yeah. He introduces us to this character, Mrs. Fidget.
Yes, Mrs. Fidget.
Now, she's the embodiment of this kind of distorted affection.
The queen of smothering, right? Always
Yeah.
needing to be needed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she ends up creating this whole web of dependence around her family.
All under the guise of love, but it becomes incredibly manipulative.
Right. They're constantly caught in this trap of reassuring her, catering to her needs. It's exhausting, frankly.
It is. And Lewis is showing us how this kind of love, even though it presents itself as selfless,
Right.
can actually be quite selfish at its core.
It's a real paradox.
It is. And I think what Lewis is getting at is that a lot of this warped affection stems from fear.
Interesting. What kind of fear?
Fear of our own inner emptiness, maybe?
Okay.
A reluctance to really face the fact that ultimately what we truly need is God's love.
Ah, I see. So we're trying to fill that void with something else.
Exactly.
So even in this most basic form of love, affection, there's a lot to unpack, a lot to examine about our own motivations and how we express it.
Absolutely. It's a great starting point, though, to set the stage for the other loves Lewis explores.
Exactly. And he builds from this to take us to a higher level of love, which he calls friendship.
Okay.
And the key difference here is choice. Friendship is freely given, not out of necessity.
Right.
It's based on those shared interests and values and that sense of truly getting each other.
It's like finding your tribe, your people.
Yes. The ones who speak your language, understand your humor,
Absolutely.
and share your passions.
And Lewis emphasizes how expansive this kind of love can be.
Oh yeah, unlike affection, which tends to be limited to a smaller circle.
Right. Friendship has the capacity to just grow and grow and grow to include more and more people.
And it's beautiful how he points out this paradox, how friendship is both unnecessary.
In the sense that it's not essential for survival.
Exactly, but it ends up being deeply enriching. It adds so much value to our lives.
He even calls it the least natural of loves because it's not driven by instinct like affection
Right, we choose it.
and cultivate it.
But just like with affection, there are potential pitfalls.
Oh, yeah. What does he say about that?
Well, Lewis warns us about friendship turning into a clique,
Oh, I see.
an exclusive club that fosters pride and a sense of superiority over those outside the circle.
It's that subtle shift from we found our people to we're better than those other people.
Yes. And it makes you really think about your own friendships, doesn't it?
It does.
Are we using them to build ourselves up at the expense of others? Or are we embracing that expansive, inclusive nature of true friendship?
Really good food for thought.
So from there, Lewis leads us to a type of love that's often overlooked, which he calls appreciation.
Appreciation. Interesting.
And this love isn't primarily directed toward people, but toward things that are objectively good and beautiful.
Okay.
And I love how he connects this to the idea of pleasure. He makes this distinction between need pleasures, like satisfying hunger or thirst,
Okay.
and then appreciation pleasures, which are about experiencing beauty and excellence.
Okay, so what are some examples of those?
Think of listening to the piece of music that just moves you deeply,
Oh, yeah.
or gazing at a breathtaking sunset.
I see.
And Lewis points out that these appreciation pleasures come with a sense of obligation.
obligation. How so?
It's not just passively enjoying something.
Okay.
It's about actively engaging with it, savoring it, expressing your admiration. It's almost like we owe it to the beautiful thing to fully appreciate it.
That's an interesting way to put it. I like that.
It's like that urge to share something beautiful with someone else.
Right. Look at this. Isn't it amazing?
Exactly. It's about recognizing the inherent goodness and beauty in the world around us.
And Lewis argues that cultivating this appreciation, both for nature and for human creation, is essential for a truly fulfilling life.
Absolutely. It opens our eyes to wonder and beauty that we might otherwise miss.
It enriches our experience of the world.
Yeah. And it connects us to something larger than ourselves.
I can see that. So, from appreciating beauty and goodness, where does Lewis take us next?
Well, then he prepares us for the most intense and often misunderstood love of all, Eros.
Ah, Eros. The passionate love, the stuff of poetry and song.
Exactly. The love between romantic partners.
The one that's often idealized and romanticized.
Absolutely. But Lewis approaches Eros with a really interesting blend of realism and reverence.
How so?
Well, he doesn't shy away from the raw power of Eros.
Okay.
He describes it as this love that elevates physical desire. It transforms it into a force that can inspire incredible acts of courage, selflessness, even creativity.
And he talks about seeing your beloved as someone extraordinary.
Yeah, it's someone who captures your imagination, inspires you.
Not just someone who fulfills your needs.
Exactly. And what I love is how he emphasizes the importance of playfulness and humor in Eros.
Oh, yeah.
He reminds us that even the most intense relationships need that lightness, that laughter.
It's not always grand gestures and dramatic declarations.
No, it can be playful, joyful, full of life.
And that's important, especially since Lewis also cautions us about making Eros the sole source of our happiness.
Oh, absolutely. Like putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. He reminds us that while it can be incredibly powerful and transformative,
Yeah,
Eros is also finite, and it can easily become an idol
right.
if we expect it to meet all our needs and last forever unchanged.
So it's about keeping things in perspective.
Definitely. And it's at this point that Lewis starts connecting these different loves to a higher purpose. He introduces this concept of charity, the divine love that God has for us.
So we've gone from affection, friendship, appreciation, Eros,
Right.
and now we're stepping into the realm of the transcendent.
The love that has the power to change everything.
Exactly.
And what's fascinating is that Lewis doesn't see charity as separate from those other loves.
Okay.
He presents it as the force that transforms them,
Ah, I see.
purifies them, elevates them to a higher purpose.
So it's like charity is the key that unlocks the true potential of those other loves.
Exactly. It infuses them with a whole new depth,
Wow.
a new meaning,
Okay.
a whole new capacity for selflessness and sacrifice.
And that leads us to another fascinating point that we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Oh, what's that?
How even loves directed towards things, not just people, can be just as powerful and complex.
Really?
Yes. And a charity can work in those areas too.
Interesting. I can't wait to delve into that. I'm really intrigued by this idea of love for things, not just people. It's not something you hear discussed often.
Right. But think about it. We experience these powerful emotions, these deep connections to places, to ideas, even to objects sometimes.
That's true. I have a certain, fondness for my old record player, for example.
Exactly. And Lewis dives into a couple of these in particular, starting with our love for nature.
Ah, okay.
I think most of us have felt that sense of awe and wonder when we're surrounded by nature.
Yeah, definitely.
Like standing on a mountaintop, gazing at the stars, or even just walking through a forest. It touches something deep inside us.
Lewis describes it as experiencing something larger than ourselves.
Yes, something transcendent. And he talks about how for some people, this love for nature is a constant companion.
Especially those with strong ties to the land.
Right, it's deeply ingrained in their identity.
But he contrasts this with a more, aesthetic appreciation of nature.
Oh, interesting.
The kind that focuses on pretty landscapes and scenic views.
Okay.
And while there's nothing wrong with finding beauty in nature, Lewis argues that true love for nature goes deeper than that.
So it's not just about taking a pretty picture for Instagram.
Right. It's about embracing nature in its entirety.
All its complexities and contradictions.
Exactly. The beauty and the harshness, the serenity and the wildness.
He even suggests that this kind of love for nature can lead us closer to God.
Oh, I like
Because
that.
we're seeing God's grandeur and majesty reflected in the created world.
Makes sense.
But he's also careful to warn us against turning love for nature into a religion in itself.
Oh, okay. So not worshiping nature, but worshiping the God who created it.
Exactly. It's about keeping those priorities straight, recognizing that while nature can be incredibly inspiring.
It's not the ultimate source of our meaning and purpose.
Right.
And then Lewis tackles another complex form of love, patriotism.
Ah, yes, patriotism. A tricky one, especially these days.
Very tricky. It's so easy for it to get tangled up in politics and ideology.
Absolutely. And Lewis doesn't shy away from the potential pitfalls of patriotism either,
No, he really dives into how easily it can be distorted.
leading to pride and arrogance, even violence.
He talks about how empires throughout history have used patriotism to justify all sorts of terrible things.
Like colonialism and oppression.
It's a sobering reminder that even love for our country, if it's not tempered with wisdom and humility.
Can be really dangerous,
And he points out how easily patriotism can become idolatrous,
placing the nation above God.
and then excusing any action in its name. It's about recognizing that our ultimate allegiance should be to God, not to any earthly power.
But Lewis doesn't completely reject patriotism.
Right, he recognizes that it can also be a force for good,
It can inspire people to serve their country.
to work for its betterment.
It's about finding that balance, that sweet spot where patriotism motivates us to be better citizens,
Will contribute to the common good.
but without falling into that trap of blind allegiance or superiority.
Lewis talks about how true patriotism actually involves a willingness to critique our own country.
Oh, interesting. To acknowledge its flaws and work to address them.
Yeah, it's about loving our country not in spite of its imperfections, but because of its potential for greatness.
And that brings us back to those four loves: affection, friendship, appreciation, eros.
And how they can be both enriching and challenging.
They can bring us joy and connection, but they can also become distorted and possessive if they're not guided by something higher.
Which is where charity comes in.
Exactly.
It transforms those loves.
Purifies our motives and directs our actions towards the greater good.
And in the last part of our deep dive, we'll explore how charity works as that transformative force in our lives.
We'll look at how it reshapes our understanding of love and leads us towards a more fulfilling and meaningful existence.
So we've seen how complex these loves can be, even when they're directed at things, not just people.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, and I think it highlights how important it is to have that guiding principle, that higher purpose to direct those loves.
Exactly, and that's where charity comes in. It's not just another emotion alongside those other loves, it's the element that transforms them. It unlocks their true potential.
I like that. It's like charity is the fuel that allows those other loves to really take flight. But it's also about recognizing when those loves become distorted, when they need to be, well, refined.
Exactly. Like we talked about with affection becoming possessive or friendship turning into a clique, it's charity that helps us see those distortions.
And shows us how to love in a way that's truly selfless and life-giving.
Right. It's not about denying or suppressing those natural loves. It's about allowing charity to guide them.
To strip away that selfishness, that ego, and then redirect those loves towards something higher.
And this brings us to one of the most challenging, even controversial aspects of charity that Lewis explores.
Oh yeah, I know what you're going to say.
Yeah.
That idea of sometimes needing to hate those we love most.
It sounds harsh, doesn't it? But I think it's important to remember what Lewis is really getting at here.
It's not about wishing harm on someone or holding a grudge.
No, it's about a radical reordering of our priorities. It's about putting our love for God above all else, even if it means making tough choices.
Choices that might cause pain or disappointment to those closest to us.
Right, because sometimes the most loving thing we can do is speak truth, set boundaries.
Even step back from a relationship if it's leading someone away from God.
It's a difficult concept, no doubt. But Lewis argues that it's this willingness to prioritize God's will above our own desires that allows us to truly love with charity.
To love with that pure, selfless love that puts the other person's ultimate good above our own comfort or desires.
And that kind of love is perfectly modeled in Christ, who sacrificed himself for us, even though we were still sinners, still so far from perfect.
It's a radical love. It challenges us to really rethink everything we thought we knew about love.
It's not about seeking our own happiness, it's about giving ourselves fully to God, letting his love flow through us, becoming a source of healing and strength and hope for others.
And I love how Lewis points out that this concept of charity, it doesn't just transform our relationships with others, it transforms us as individuals.
Right, it breaks down that ego, that self-centeredness, and opens us up to a whole new way of experiencing the world.
It's about dying to ourselves, surrendering our desires, and allowing God to reshape us into the people He created us to be.
And that's a process.
It's a journey.
It doesn't happen overnight.
It's a lifelong journey of learning to love more deeply, more selflessly, to love more like Christ.
And we're not alone on that journey. We have each other, we have our communities, and we have God's grace.
That's such an encouraging thought. As we wrap up our deep dive into the four loves, I want to ask, what's your biggest takeaway? What will you carry with you from this exploration?
It's that reminder that love isn't a destination, it's a journey. It's about continually seeking to align our hearts with God's love and allowing that love to transform us and to overflow into our relationships.
Beautifully said. And for everyone listening, I hope this deep dive has sparked new insights and questions for you as well. Take some time to reflect on these ideas. Think about the role of love in your own life. And consider how charity might be at work, challenging you to love more deeply and selflessly, to love more like Christ.
And that wraps up our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of C.S. Lewis's The Four Loves. It's a book that continues to offer so much wisdom and insight into the complexities and the transformative power of love.
We invite you to subscribe to our channel and share this episode with your friends. Join us next time for another deep dive into a new and fascinating topic. Until then, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep loving.